The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Base Coronado as Lieutenant Sarah Chin stepped out of her dusty Jeep. Her long black hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her desert camouflage uniform bore the fresh creases of someone who took pride in their appearance. At 28, she had already served 2 tours in Afghanistan as an Army intelligence officer, but today marked the beginning of something entirely different. Sarah walked toward the imposing concrete building that housed the Naval Special Warfare Command. Her orders were clear, but unusual. She was being transferred to work as a liaison between naval intelligence and the SEAL teams. It was an assignment that raised eyebrows throughout the military community. Women weren't allowed in direct combat roles with the SEALs, and many questioned why the Navy would assign a female Army officer to work so closely with their most elite units. The base was already buzzing with activity. Sailors in their crisp whites hurried between buildings while maintenance crews worked on the various watercraft moored at the nearby docks. Sarah could hear the distant sound of weapons fire from the training ranges and the rhythmic chanting of recruits somewhere beyond the palm trees that lined the main road. As she approached the main entrance, Sarah noticed a group of men in tin uniforms gathered near the flagpole. Their conversation died as she walked past, and she could feel their eyes following her. She had grown accustomed to this reaction over the years. Being a woman in the military meant constantly proving herself worthy of respect that was automatically given to her male counterparts. "You lost, lady," one of them called out. His tone was casual but carried an undertone of mockery. Sarah stopped and turned to face the group. The man who had spoken was tall and broad-shouldered with the kind of confidence that came from years of specialized training. His uniform bore the distinctive trident pin of a Navy SEAL, and his weathered face suggested he had seen more than his share of combat. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Sarah replied evenly. "Lieutenant Chun, Army Intelligence, reporting for duty." The SEAL's eyes widened slightly, and he exchanged glances with his teammates. "You're the one they assigned to babysit us?" "I prefer to think of it as providing tactical intelligence support," Sarah said, keeping her voice professional despite the growing irritation she felt. Another SEAL stepped forward, younger than the first but carrying himself with the same swagger. "Ma'am, no offense, but we've been doing this job for a long time without needing help from someone who's never seen real action." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had indeed seen real action, more than most of these men realized. Her 2 deployments in Afghanistan had included several direct fire engagements and countless hours of dangerous reconnaissance missions. But she knew that arguing would only make things worse. "I'm here to do a job," she said simply. "I suggest we all focus on that." The first SEAL chuckled and shook his head. "This is what happens when politics gets involved in military operations. Next thing you know, they'll be telling us we need to hold sensitivity training before every mission." Sarah felt her face flush, but forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with this attitude before, and she knew that rising to the bait would only confirm their prejudices. Instead, she nodded curtly and continued toward the building entrance. Inside, the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters was a maze of corridors lined with photographs of famous SEAL operations and displays of captured enemy weapons. Sarah followed the signs to the administrative offices, where she was scheduled to meet with Commander William Torres, the officer who would oversee her assignment. Commander Torres was a compact man in his early 40s with graying hair and intense blue eyes. His office walls were covered with unit patches from various SEAL teams and photographs of him with other military leaders. He looked up from his paperwork as Sarah knocked on his open door. "Lieutenant Chun, come in," he said, rising from his chair. His handshake was firm, and his manner was professional but guarded. "Please have a seat." Sarah settled into the chair across from his desk, noting the way Torres studied her with obvious skepticism. She had become expert at reading these expressions over the years, the doubt, the questioning of whether she truly belonged in their world. "I'll be honest with you, Lieutenant," Torres began, leaning back in his chair. "This assignment wasn't my idea. It came down from Naval Intelligence Command, and I'm told it's part of some new initiative to improve inter-service cooperation." "I understand, sir," Sarah replied. "I'm here to do whatever job you need me to do." Torres nodded slowly. "Your file is impressive. Top marks at the Intelligence Officer Basic course, 2 combat deployments, several commendations. But working with SEAL teams is different from regular Army intelligence work. These men operate under extreme pressure, often with incomplete information, and they need to trust that everyone around them knows what they're doing. I'm confident I can meet those standards, sir. We'll see, Torres said, though his tone suggested he had serious doubts. Your primary responsibility will be to provide real-time intelligence analysis during mission planning and to serve as a liaison between our teams and Army intelligence assets in the field. You'll also be observing our training exercises to better understand how we operate. Sarah nodded. When do I start? Tomorrow morning, 0500 hours. Team 6 is running a maritime interdiction exercise, and you'll be embedded with their planning cell. Torres paused and fixed her with a steady gaze. Lieutenant, I want to be clear about something. The men you'll be working with are among the most skilled warriors in the world. They've earned their positions through years of the most demanding training imaginable, and they've proven themselves in combat time and again. They may not immediately accept you, and, frankly, I can't blame them. You'll need to earn their respect. I understand, sir. I hope you do, Torres said. Because if you can't handle the pressure or if you become a distraction to the team, you'll be reassigned immediately. I won't compromise the effectiveness of my units for the sake of political correctness. Sarah felt a flash of anger at the implication that her assignment was merely political, but she kept her expression neutral. That won't be necessary, sir. After leaving Torres's office, Sarah was given a brief tour of the facility by a young petty officer who seemed genuinely curious about her background. He showed her the briefing rooms where mission planning took place, the armory where weapons were stored and maintained, and the medical facility where injured operators were treated. The teams pretty much live here when they're not deployed, the petty officer explained as they walked past a recreation area where several SEALs were playing pool. Training never really stops. There's always something new to learn or skills to maintain. Sarah observed the easy camaraderie between the men as they joked and competed with each other. It was the kind of bond that could only be forged through shared hardship and mutual reliance. She wondered how long it would take to break through the wall of skepticism that surrounded her arrival. That evening, Sarah checked into the temporary quarters she had been assigned on base. Her small room contained little more than a bed, a desk, and a small refrigerator. She unpacked her few belongings and set up her laptop to review the mission files she had been given. The maritime interdiction exercise involved simulating the capture of a hostile vessel in international waters. It was a complex operation that required precise timing and coordination between multiple units. Sarah studied the intelligence reports, weather data, and tactical assessments, making notes about potential complications and alternative approaches. As she worked, Sarah thought about the challenges that lay ahead. She had always been determined to succeed in whatever role the military assigned her. But this felt different. The stakes seemed higher, and the scrutiny more intense. She was representing not just herself, but all women who might follow in her footsteps. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. She opened it to find a young woman in navy blues standing in the hallway. Lieutenant Shin, I'm Petty Officer Martinez from the Intelligence Department. I heard you were starting tomorrow, and I wanted to introduce myself. Sarah smiled and invited Martinez inside. It was a relief to meet another woman on the base, especially one who seemed friendly rather than suspicious of her presence. I've been working here for about a year, Martinez explained as they sat at Sarah's small desk. I do mostly administrative work for the intelligence section, but I hear a lot of what goes on. Can I give you some advice? Please do. Martinez lowered her voice. The teams are good guys, but they're very protective of their culture. They've seen outsiders come and go, especially people they think are just here for career advancement or to check some diversity box. If you prove that you're here to help them succeed and that you're not afraid to get your hands dirty, they'll accept you. But it might take a while. How long is a while? Martinez shrugged. Depends on you. Some people never break through. Others earn respect pretty quickly if they demonstrate real value. She paused and looked directly at Sarah. There's also going to be talk about why you're really here, whether you can handle the pressure, that kind of thing. Don't let it get to you. After Martinez left, Sarah returned to her mission preparation. She spent several more hours analyzing every aspect of the exercise, looking for ways she could contribute meaningfully to the team's success. She knew that tomorrow would be crucial in setting the tone for her entire assignment. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the briefing room 20 minutes early, carrying her laptop and a thick folder of intelligence reports. The room was empty except for a few chairs arranged around a large table and several large monitors mounted on the walls. She chose a seat near the back and began reviewing her notes one final time. At exactly 0500 hours, members of SEAL Team 6 began filing into the room. Sarah recognized several of them from the previous day, including the man who had questioned her presence on base. They glanced at her as they took their seats, but no one spoke to her directly. A few minutes later, a tall, muscular man with lieutenant commander's insignia entered the room. His presence immediately commanded attention, and Sarah could see the respect in his teammates' eyes as they straightened in their chairs. "Good morning, gentlemen," the officer said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I'm Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell, and I'll be leading today's exercise." His eyes found Sarah in the back of the room. "I understand we have an observer joining us today." Sarah stood up. "Lieutenant Sarah Chun, Army Intelligence, sir." Mitchell nodded curtly. "Lieutenant Chun will be monitoring our planning process as part of a new inter-service cooperation initiative. I expect everyone to conduct themselves professionally." The briefing began with Mitchell outlining the exercise scenario. A merchant vessel suspected of carrying illegal weapons was traveling through international waters. The team's mission was to intercept the ship, conduct a search, and secure any contraband while minimizing casualties and avoiding international incident. As Mitchell spoke, Sarah took careful notes and cross-referenced the information with her intelligence files. She noticed several discrepancies between the scenario briefing and the background intelligence she had reviewed. The ship's previous ports of call suggested a different route than the one described in the exercise, and satellite imagery showed unusual modifications to the vessel's structure. Sarah hesitated, uncertain whether she should speak up. This was her first day, and she didn't want to appear presumptuous. But she also knew that pointing out these details could improve the realism of the training and potentially reveal important tactical considerations. As Mitchell finished his initial briefing and asked for questions, Sarah raised her hand. "Sir, I've been reviewing the background intelligence on the target vessel, and I noticed some inconsistencies with the scenario as presented." The room fell silent, and Sarah could feel every pair of eyes focused on her. Mitchell's expression was unreadable as he waited for her to continue. "The ship's previous ports and cargo manifests suggest it would likely be following a different shipping lane than the one indicated in your briefing. Also, satellite imagery shows what appears to be structural modifications that could indicate hidden compartments or defensive positions." Mitchell studied her for a moment, then walked over to the large monitor and pulled up a maritime chart. "Show me." Sarah moved to the front of the room, acutely aware of the skeptical faces watching her every move. She used a laser pointer to indicate the ship's likely position based on her analysis, explaining her reasoning clearly and concisely. When she finished, Mitchell examined the chart silently for several long seconds. The rest of the team waited, and Sarah could feel her heart pounding as she wondered whether she had just made a terrible mistake by contradicting the exercise parameters. Finally, Mitchell turned to face the room. "Lieutenant Chun is correct. The original scenario was based on outdated intelligence. Her analysis changes our approach significantly." He looked directly at Sarah. "What do you recommend?" Sarah felt a surge of confidence as she realized her expertise was being genuinely solicited rather than merely tolerated. She moved back to the chart and began outlining a revised tactical approach that took into account the new intelligence picture. The room remained quiet as she spoke, but the quality of attention had changed. Instead of skeptical dismissal, she sensed genuine interest in what she had to say. When she finished her recommendations, Mitchell asked several detailed questions about her sources and methodology. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant," he said finally. "This is exactly the kind of intelligence support that makes operations more effective." He turned to address the rest of the team. "This demonstrates why we need to stay flexible in our planning and why different perspectives can be valuable." As the briefing continued with the revised scenario, Sarah noticed that several team members were now asking her technical questions about intelligence gathering and analysis. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from polite tolerance to genuine professional engagement. The exercise itself took place later that morning on a decommissioned Navy vessel anchored in San Diego Bay. Sarah observed from the command ship as the SEAL team approached their target using rigid inflatable boats. She provided real-time intelligence updates as the situation developed, helping the team adapt to changing conditions during the simulation. When the exercise concluded, Mitchell approached Sarah as she was packing up her equipment. "Lieutenant, that was impressive work today. You probably prevented what would have been a failed mission if we had stuck with the original plan." "Thank you, sir. I'm glad I could contribute." Mitchell studied her for a moment. "You know, most people in your position would have kept quiet on their first day. Why did you speak up?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Because providing accurate intelligence is my job, sir. The scenario called for realistic training, and I had information that could improve the realism, even though it meant contradicting the exercise plan in front of the entire team. Especially because of that, sir. If I'm not willing to provide honest assessments when the stakes are low, how can the team trust my judgment when it really matters?" Mitchell smiled for the first time since Sarah had met him. "You might just fit in here after all, Lieutenant." As Sarah walked back to her quarters that evening, she reflected on the day's events. She had cleared one hurdle, but she knew that earning acceptance would require consistent performance over time. The SEALs were professionals who valued competence above all else, and she would need to prove her worth repeatedly. She had also learned something important about herself. Standing up in that briefing room had required courage, but it was the kind of courage that came from confidence in her abilities rather than from a desire to prove a point. She realized that her success here would depend not on trying to be accepted as one of the guys, but on being the best intelligence officer she could be. That night, as Sarah prepared for the next day's training exercises, she felt cautiously optimistic about her assignment. She had made a good first impression, but she knew that the real test would come during actual operations when lives were on the line, and there was no room for error. The sound of helicopters taking off from the nearby airfield reminded her that somewhere in the world, SEAL teams were conducting real missions with real consequences. Soon, she might be providing intelligence support for those operations. The thought was both thrilling and sobering, and it reinforced her determination to prove that she belonged among the Navy's elite warriors. 3 weeks into her assignment, Sarah had established a routine that began each morning at 0430 hours. She used the early quiet time to review overnight intelligence reports and prepare briefing materials before the teams began their daily training cycles. Her small office in the intelligence section had become a hub of activity as SEAL operators increasingly sought her input on mission planning and threat assessment. The transformation in how the teams viewed her had been gradual but unmistakable. What began as reluctant tolerance had evolved into genuine professional respect as Sarah consistently demonstrated her value. Her background in Army intelligence, combined with her quick grasp of naval operations, allowed her to provide insights that often improved mission effectiveness. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell had become a strong advocate for her work, frequently requesting her participation in planning sessions for major exercises. Other team leaders had followed suit, and Sarah found herself juggling multiple assignments as demand for her expertise grew. On this particular morning, Sarah was reviewing satellite imagery when Petty Officer Martinez knocked on her doorframe. "Ma'am, Commander Torres wants to see you in his office right away," Martinez said, her expression unusually serious. Sarah saved her work and walked quickly to Torres's office, wondering what could require such urgent attention. She found the door open and Torres standing behind his desk, studying a classified message on his computer screen. His face was grim, and Sarah felt a knot forming in her stomach. "Close the door and have a seat, Lieutenant," Torres said without looking up. Sarah complied, noting the formal tone that suggested something significant had happened. Torres finished reading the message, then turned his attention to her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "How would you assess your integration with the teams over the past 3 weeks?" Torres asked. "I believe it's gone well, sir. I've been able to contribute meaningfully to several exercises, and the operators seem comfortable working with me." Torres nodded slowly. That's consistent with what I've been hearing from the team leaders. Your work has been exemplary, and your tactical insights have improved our training significantly. Sarah waited for him to continue, sensing that praise was not the reason for this meeting. I just received a message from SOCOM headquarters, Torres continued. There's been a development in Somalia that requires immediate attention. Intelligence suggests that a group of American aid workers captured 3 months ago are being held in a compound near Mogadishu. The window for rescue is closing rapidly. Sarah's pulse quickened as she began to understand why she had been summoned. The mission will require precise intelligence support, real-time analysis, and coordination with multiple agencies, Torres explained. SOCOM has specifically requested that you be assigned as the primary intelligence liaison for this operation. Me, sir. Sarah tried to keep the surprise out of her voice. Your work here has been noticed at the highest levels. More importantly, you've proven that you can work effectively with SEAL teams under pressure. This mission will require someone who understands both Army and Navy intelligence capabilities and can coordinate between multiple organizations. Torres paused and fixed her with a steady gaze. This is not a training exercise, Lieutenant. If you accept this assignment, you'll be responsible for providing intelligence that could mean the difference between life and death for both the hostages and the rescue team. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Sarah felt a surge of both excitement and apprehension. This was the kind of real-world mission she had trained for throughout her military career, but the stakes were higher than anything she had experienced before. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Good. You'll be working with SEAL Team 6 under Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. The operation is classified at the highest levels, and you'll be briefed on the full details in the secure conference room in 1 hour. Pack your gear. You'll be deploying to the Horn of Africa within 24 hours. As Sarah left Torres's office, her mind raced with the implications of what she had just been told. This assignment represented both an enormous opportunity and a tremendous risk. Success would validate everything she had worked for in her military career. Failure could cost lives and any possibility of future assignments with special operations units. An hour later, Sarah sat in a windowless conference room with Lieutenant Commander Mitchell and 5 other SEAL team members. The walls were lined with maps of East Africa, satellite photographs, and architectural diagrams of the target compound. A large monitor displayed a real-time intelligence briefing from analysts at various government agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what we know, began a civilian analyst via secure video link. 6 American relief workers were captured by the terrorist group Al-Shabaab 11 weeks ago while distributing medical supplies in rural Somalia. They're being held in a compound approximately 30 kilometers northeast of Mogadishu. The analyst highlighted the location on the map. Recent intelligence indicates the hostages are in deteriorating condition, and there are indications that their captors may be planning to relocate them to a more remote location within the next 48 hours. Once that happens, rescue becomes exponentially more difficult. Sarah studied the compound layout on her laptop, cross-referencing the architectural details with aerial photographs taken over the past week. She noticed several discrepancies that could affect mission planning. Mitchell leaned forward in his chair. What's our intelligence picture on enemy strength and disposition? The analyst pulled up additional imagery. Best estimate is 12 to 15 fighters in the compound at any given time. They're armed with small arms and at least 1 heavy machine gun positioned on the roof. There's also evidence of improvised explosive devices around the perimeter. Sarah raised her hand. Sir, I've been analyzing the imagery, and I believe the enemy's strength estimate may be low. All eyes turned to her, and she felt the familiar flutter of nervousness that came with contradicting established intelligence in front of senior officers. The thermal signatures from the compound suggest a larger number of occupants, she continued. Also, the pattern of vehicle movement indicates regular shifts of personnel that would be consistent with a force of 20 to 25 fighters rather than 12 to 15. The analyst on the screen frowned. Lieutenant, our assessment is based on direct observation and signals intelligence. What's the basis for your higher estimate? Sarah pulled up her analysis on the room's main display. I've been tracking the heat signatures over a 72-hour period, and the pattern shows consistent occupancy of areas that appear empty during daylight observation. There's also evidence of underground chambers that wouldn't be visible to overhead surveillance. Mitchell studied the display carefully. What are the tactical implications of the higher number? It changes everything, sir, Sarah replied. The original plan assumes a quick in and out with minimal resistance. If we're facing 25 fighters instead of 15, we need more support and a different approach to the assault. The room fell silent as Mitchell and his team absorbed this information. Sarah could see them mentally recalculating the mission parameters, and she hoped she was right about her assessment. Lieutenant Chun, how confident are you in this analysis? Mitchell asked. High confidence, sir. I've triple-checked the methodology, and the thermal patterns are consistent across multiple collection platforms. Mitchell nodded and turned to address the analyst on screen. We need to revise our planning assumptions. Can you get us updated intelligence on the underground areas Lieutenant Chun identified? Over the next 4 hours, Sarah worked closely with the SEAL team to develop a comprehensive intelligence picture of the target. Her analysis led to the discovery of several previously unknown aspects of the compound, including escape routes, hidden weapons caches, and the likely location of the hostages within the building. As the briefing concluded, Mitchell pulled Sarah aside. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. Your analysis probably just prevented this mission from turning into a disaster. He paused and looked at her seriously. I want you to know that you'll be accompanying us to the forward operating base in Djibouti. You'll be providing real-time intelligence support from the Tactical Operations Center during the mission. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the prospect of supporting an actual combat operation. I won't let you down, sir. I know you won't. But I need to be clear about something. Once we insert into Somalia, there's no margin for error. Every piece of intelligence you provide could affect whether my men come home alive. I need to know that you can handle that pressure. I can handle it, sir. Mitchell studied her for a moment, then nodded. Get some rest tonight. We fly out at 0800 tomorrow. That evening, Sarah packed her deployment gear with meticulous care. She included her laptop, multiple backup hard drives containing intelligence databases, and specialized communications equipment that would allow her to coordinate with multiple agencies during the operation. She also packed her personal protective equipment, body armor, helmet, and medical kit that might be needed if the Tactical Operations Center came under attack. As she prepared for what could be the most important mission of her career, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her first day at Naval Base Coronado. The skepticism and doubt she had encountered had been replaced by professional respect and genuine reliance on her capabilities. She had proven that her gender was irrelevant compared to her ability to contribute to mission success. The next morning, Sarah joined the SEAL team at the airfield where a military transport aircraft waited to carry them to Africa. As she climbed the aircraft's rear ramp with her gear, she noticed that several team members who had initially questioned her presence now sought her input on various aspects of the mission. During the long flight across the Atlantic and Mediterranean, Sarah continued to refine her intelligence analysis using satellite communications to coordinate with analysts around the world. She developed detailed profiles of the terrorist leaders, mapped out likely escape routes from the compound, and identified potential complications that could affect the mission. 12 hours later, their aircraft touched down at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, the primary U.S. military base in East Africa. The base was a sprawling complex of temporary buildings and tents situated in one of the hottest and most inhospitable environments on Earth. The temperature outside was already approaching 110 degrees Fahrenheit despite the early morning hour. Sarah was assigned quarters in an air-conditioned trailer that she would share with other intelligence personnel. The Tactical Operations Center where she would work during the mission was a sophisticated facility filled with communications equipment, computer terminals, and large screens displaying real-time intelligence from various sources. Over the next 18 hours, Sarah worked with the mission planners to finalize every detail of the rescue operation. The plan called for the SEAL team to insert via helicopter under cover of darkness, assault the compound, secure the hostages, and extract to a predetermined landing zone where they would be picked up by the same aircraft. Sarah's role would be to monitor intelligence sources throughout the mission, providing updates on enemy movements, changes in the tactical situation, and any new threats that might emerge. She would also coordinate with drone operators, signals intelligence specialists, and other agencies to ensure the team had access to all available information. As the sun set over the Horn of Africa, casting long shadows across the military base, Sarah made final preparations for the mission. She tested her communications equipment one last time, reviewed her emergency procedures, and mentally rehearsed her responsibilities during each phase of the operation. At 2,200 hours, she took her position in the Tactical Operations Center as Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, and his team conducted their final equipment checks. Through the secure communications system, she could hear the pilots starting their helicopter engines and the final coordination between various support elements. All stations, this is Mission Control, came the voice of the operations officer. Operation Windfall is a go. I repeat, Operation Windfall is a go. Sarah watched the large display screen as icons representing the helicopters began moving toward the target area. After weeks of preparation and analysis, the mission was finally beginning. In a few hours, she would know whether her intelligence assessments were accurate and whether her contribution would help bring the hostages home safely. As the helicopters disappeared into the darkness over Somalia, Sarah began the most intense and important night of her military career. Everything she had trained for, everything she had worked to prove about her capabilities, would be tested in the crucible of actual combat operations. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders as she began tracking the mission's progress, knowing that the lives of both the hostages and the rescue team depended on her ability to provide accurate, timely intelligence in the heat of battle. The Tactical Operations Center hummed with quiet intensity as Sarah monitored multiple intelligence streams simultaneously. 3 large screens displayed the helicopter's progress toward the target, thermal imagery from overhead drones, and communications intercepts from the target area. Her headset crackled with radio traffic from various military units coordinating the mission. Raptor 1-1, this is Overwatch, came Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's voice over the secure radio network. We are 15 minutes out from target. Request final intelligence update. Sarah keyed her microphone. Overwatch, this is Lightning. Target area remains quiet. No significant movement detected in the past 30 minutes. Weather conditions are clear with light winds from the southwest. Copy, Lightning. Any change in your assessment of enemy strength? Sarah studied the thermal imagery carefully, looking for any signs that her earlier analysis might have been incorrect. The compound appeared exactly as she had predicted, multiple heat signatures indicating a larger force than originally estimated. Negative, Overwatch. I'm still tracking approximately 22 to 25 individuals in the target building. Recommend proceeding with revised assault plan. Roger that, Lightning. Raptor 1-1 out. Colonel James Harrison, the overall mission commander, stood behind Sarah's workstation monitoring her analysis. He was a tall, lean officer with gray hair and piercing green eyes who had personally overseen dozens of special operations missions throughout his career. How confident are you in that count, Lieutenant? Harrison asked quietly. Very confident, sir. The thermal patterns have been consistent for the past 4 hours, and signals intelligence confirms increased communications activity consistent with a larger force. Harrison nodded. The assault team is counting on your assessment. If you're wrong about the enemy's strength, I understand, sir, Sarah replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on her shoulders. But I'm confident in the analysis. At exactly 0147 hours local time, the helicopters reached the target area. Sarah watched the display screens as 2 Black Hawk helicopters approached the compound from different directions, their pilots using night vision systems to navigate in complete darkness. Lightning, this is Raptor 1-1. Mitchell's voice came over the radio. We have visual on target. Compound layout matches your briefing exactly. Beginning final approach. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she watched the operation unfold in real time. Years of training and preparation were about to be tested in a few crucial minutes that would determine whether the hostages lived or died. Raptor 1-1, be advised that thermal shows movement in the eastern section of the compound, Sarah reported as she noticed new activity on her screens. Multiple individuals moving toward what appears to be defensive positions. Copy, Lightning. We see it too. Adjusting approach vector. The first helicopter landed in a small clearing 200 meters from the compound, while the second aircraft took up an overwatch position. Sarah watched through drone cameras as dark figures rappelled from the first helicopter and moved swiftly toward the target building. Raptor 11 is on the ground, Mitchell reported. Beginning approach to target building. Sarah coordinated with the drone operators to provide continuous surveillance coverage of the assault. Her role was to watch for threats that the ground team might miss. Enemy reinforcements, escape attempts, or changes in the tactical situation that could affect the mission. Lightning, this is Raptor 11. We have contact with enemy forces at the main entrance, taking fire from multiple positions. The sound of gunfire could be heard through the radio as the SEAL team engaged the terrorist defenders. Sarah watched the thermal imagery intensely, tracking the movement of both friendly and enemy forces as the battle unfolded. Raptor 11, be advised you have approximately 6 enemy fighters moving to flank your position from the north side of the building, Sarah reported urgently. Copy, Lightning. Raptor 12, can you engage those targets? Raptor 12 engaging with door guns, came the response from the second helicopter. The aircraft's machine guns opened fire on the flanking force, eliminating the threat before it could reach the assault team. As the firefight continued, Sarah noticed something troubling on her intelligence displays. A convoy of 3 vehicles was approaching the compound from the southeast, moving at high speed along a dirt road. Raptor 11, this is Lightning. We have possible enemy reinforcements approaching your position. 3 vehicles, approximately 5 minutes out from your location. How many personnel? Mitchell's voice was strained as he coordinated the assault while under fire. Sarah studied the thermal imagery from the drone overhead. Estimate 12 to 15 additional fighters. They appear to be heavily armed. Colonel Harrison moved closer to Sarah's workstation. Can we interdict those vehicles before they reach the compound? Sarah quickly calculated distances and timing. Negative, sir. They'll arrive before we can get air support in position. Raptor 11, you need to accelerate the timeline. Harrison spoke into his microphone. You have incoming reinforcements that will complicate your extraction. Understood. We're pushing into the building now. Sarah watched as the SEAL team breached the main entrance and began clearing rooms methodically. The thermal imagery showed them moving through the structure with practiced efficiency, engaging enemy fighters while searching for the hostages. Lightning, I need you to guide us to the most likely hostage location, Mitchell requested over the radio. Sarah studied the building layout and thermal patterns. Raptor 11, based on the architectural analysis and heat signatures, I believe the hostages are being held in the basement level, northeastern corner of the building. Copy, Lightning. Moving to basement. The tension in the operations center was palpable as everyone watched the mission unfold. Sarah felt the enormous responsibility of providing guidance that could lead the team directly to the hostages or into a deadly trap. Minutes passed that felt like hours as the SEAL team fought their way through the compound. The approaching vehicle convoy was now less than 2 minutes away, and Sarah could see that time was running out for a clean extraction. Lightning, this is Raptor 11. We've found them. 6 hostages, all alive but in poor condition. Beginning evacuation procedures. A cheer went up in the operations center, but Sarah remained focused on her displays. The mission was far from over, and the approaching reinforcements posed a serious threat to the extraction. Raptor 11, those vehicles will reach your position in 90 seconds, Sarah warned. Copy, Lightning. Raptor 12, we need immediate fire support on those vehicles. The second helicopter moved to intercept the approaching convoy while the ground team prepared to extract with the rescued hostages. Sarah coordinated with the drone operators to provide targeting information for the helicopter's weapon systems. Lightning, target the lead vehicle first, came the pilot's voice. Give me a range and bearing. Sarah worked quickly with the drone operators to provide precise targeting data. Lead vehicle is at bearing 270 degrees, range 800 meters, and closing fast. Engaging lead vehicle now. The helicopter's missiles struck the first vehicle, causing it to explode in a ball of flame that lit up the darkness. The other 2 vehicles stopped abruptly, their occupants taking cover behind the disabled truck. Raptor 11, path is clear for extraction, Sarah reported. But, be advised, the remaining enemy forces are dismounting and moving toward the compound on foot. Copy, Lightning. We're moving to extract now. Sarah watched as the SEAL team emerged from the compound carrying the 6 hostages. The rescued aid workers appeared weak and disoriented, but were able to walk with assistance. The team moved quickly toward their extraction helicopter while providing covering fire against the terrorists who were attempting to pursue them. Raptor 1-2, we need suppressive fire on the compound to cover our withdrawal, Mitchell requested. The second helicopter moved into position and began engaging the terrorist fighters who were trying to prevent the extraction. Sarah continued to provide targeting information and situational awareness as the team loaded the hostages into the first helicopter. Lightning, this is Raptor 1-1. All hostages are secure, and we are lifting off. Thanks for the outstanding support. Sarah felt a surge of relief and pride as she watched the helicopters disappear into the darkness. The mission had been successful. All 6 hostages had been rescued, and the SEAL team was returning safely to base. Colonel Harrison placed a hand on her shoulder. Exceptional work, Lieutenant. Your intelligence analysis made this mission possible. Over the next hour, Sarah continued to monitor intelligence channels to ensure there were no threats to the helicopters during their return flight. When the aircraft finally landed back at Camp Lemonnier with all personnel and hostages safe, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The rescued aid workers were immediately taken to the base medical facility where they were treated for dehydration, malnutrition, and various minor injuries sustained during their captivity. Despite their ordeal, all 6 were expected to make full recoveries. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell found Sarah in the operations center as she was finishing her post-mission intelligence report. Lieutenant, I wanted to personally thank you for your work tonight, he said, extending his hand. Your analysis was spot on, and your real-time support during the mission was invaluable. Those hostages are alive because of your expertise. Thank you, sir. I'm just glad everyone made it home safely. Mitchell smiled. You know, when you first showed up at Coronado, I had my doubts about whether you'd fit in with the teams. Tonight proved that talent and dedication matter more than anything else. You've earned a place among the best intelligence officers I've ever worked with. As Sarah walked back to her quarters in the pre-dawn darkness, she reflected on the events of the past few hours. She had provided intelligence support for a successful hostage rescue mission, helping to save 6 American lives and ensure the safe return of an entire SEAL team. It was the kind of mission she had dreamed of when she first joined the military. More importantly, she had proven to herself and others that she belonged in the special operations community. The skepticism and doubt that had greeted her arrival at Naval Base Coronado seemed like a distant memory now. She had earned the respect of some of the military's most elite warriors through her competence and professionalism. But Sarah also knew that this mission was just the beginning. The special operations community was always evolving, always facing new challenges that required the best possible intelligence support. She was determined to continue developing her skills and knowledge so she could contribute to future missions with the same level of expertise she had demonstrated tonight. As she prepared for a few hours of sleep before the long flight back to the United States, Sarah thought about the 6 aid workers who were now safe because of the coordinated efforts of dozens of military professionals. It was a reminder of why she had chosen a career in military intelligence, to use her skills in service of something larger than herself. The mission in Somalia had validated everything she had worked to achieve. But, more than that, it had shown her that the barriers she had faced as a woman in the special operations community could be overcome through competence, determination, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. But, tonight, she could rest knowing that she had played a crucial role in bringing 6 Americans home safely, and that she had earned her place among the military's most elite professionals. 6 months after the successful hostage rescue in Somalia, Sarah had become one of the most sought-after intelligence liaison officers in the special operations community. Her expertise was requested for missions across multiple theaters, and her reputation for accurate analysis and calm performance under pressure had spread throughout the special operations world. She was now permanently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command with a mandate to develop new procedures for inter-service intelligence cooperation. Her small office had been replaced with a larger workspace that housed a team of analysts from various military branches, all working to improve intelligence support for special operations missions. On this particular morning, Sarah was reviewing intelligence reports in preparation for a high-level briefing when her secure phone rang. The caller identification showed it was coming from the Pentagon. "Lieutenant Shun, this is General Patricia Hawthorne from Special Operations Command," came the crisp voice on the other end. "I need you in Washington immediately for a classified briefing. There's a situation developing that requires your specific expertise." Sarah felt the familiar surge of anticipation that came with urgent mission requests. "What's the time frame, ma'am?" "There's a military aircraft waiting for you at Miramar. You need to be wheels up within 2 hours." 3 hours later, Sarah was sitting in a secure briefing room deep within the Pentagon, surrounded by some of the most senior military officers in the United States. General Hawthorne, a compact woman with steel-gray hair and intense brown eyes, stood at the front of the room next to a large display screen showing satellite imagery of what appeared to be a military compound. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation that requires immediate attention," General Hawthorne began. 48 hours ago, a group of terrorists seized control of a nuclear research facility in Eastern Europe. They're holding 37 hostages, including several American nuclear scientists. The room fell silent as the implications of the situation became clear. Sarah studied the imagery on the screen, noting the compound's size and complexity. The facility contains enough radioactive material to create a dirty bomb that could contaminate a major city for decades, General Hawthorne continued. Intelligence indicates the terrorists plan to begin executing hostages in 72 hours unless their demands are met. A Army colonel raised his hand. "What are they demanding?" "Release of imprisoned terrorist leaders and a ransom of $50 million. The host government has indicated they will not negotiate, which leaves a military solution as the only option. General Hawthorne turned to face Sarah directly. "Lieutenant Shun, your success in Somalia has brought you to our attention for this mission. The nuclear facility presents unique challenges that require an intelligence officer with your specific skills and experience working with SEAL teams." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What makes this situation different from a standard hostage rescue? "The presence of radioactive materials changes everything," General Hawthorne explained. "One mistake could result in a nuclear contamination event that would make the area uninhabitable for decades. We need someone who can provide precise intelligence that minimizes the risk of accidentally damaging the nuclear storage areas." A Navy admiral leaned forward in his chair. "The assault team will be SEAL Team 6 under Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. He specifically requested you as the primary intelligence liaison." Sarah nodded, understanding the enormity of the responsibility being placed on her shoulders. "When do we deploy?" "Immediately. You'll fly to Germany tonight to join the mission planning team. The assault is scheduled for tomorrow night." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of intensive preparation. Sarah worked with nuclear experts from the Department of Energy to understand the layout of the research facility and the specific risks posed by the radioactive materials stored there. She studied architectural drawings, security protocols, and detailed analyses of where the terrorists were likely to position themselves within the building. The mission planning took place at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, where a joint task force had assembled the resources needed for the operation. In addition to the SEAL team, the mission included nuclear specialists, medical personnel trained in radiation exposure, and specialized equipment for detecting and containing radioactive contamination. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell greeted Sarah as she arrived at the secure briefing facility. "Lieutenant Shun, good to see you again. I hope you're ready for another challenging mission." "Always ready, sir," Sarah replied, setting down her equipment cases. "What's our intelligence picture?" Mitchell led her to a conference room where detailed maps and photographs covered every surface. "It's complicated. The facility has multiple levels, including underground storage areas for the nuclear materials. The terrorists have positioned themselves throughout the building, but we're not sure exactly where they're holding the hostages." Sarah studied the facility layout, noting the multiple entry points and the complex internal structure. "How many terrorists are we facing?" "Best estimate is 15 to 20, but they're heavily armed and have had time to prepare defensive positions." They've also threatened to detonate explosives near the nuclear storage areas if we attempt a rescue. That changes the tactical calculus significantly, Sarah observed. We need to neutralize them before they can carry out that threat. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah worked with the mission planning team to develop a comprehensive intelligence picture of the target. Using her experience from previous missions, she identified likely hostage locations, analyzed terrorist movement patterns, and developed contingency plans for various scenarios. The key challenge was minimizing the risk of radiation exposure while ensuring a successful rescue. Sarah coordinated with nuclear experts to identify safe approach routes and to understand exactly which areas of the facility needed to be avoided during the assault. The underground storage area is the most dangerous, explained Dr. Robert Chun, a nuclear physicist from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. If explosives were detonated there, the resulting contamination could affect hundreds of square kilometers. Sarah studied the underground layout carefully. How would we know if the terrorists are moving toward that area? We've positioned seismic sensors around the facility that can detect movement in the lower levels, Dr. Chen explained. You'll be monitoring those sensors during the mission and alerting the assault team if anyone approaches the nuclear storage area. As the mission planning concluded, Sarah felt the familiar pre-operation tension that came with high-stakes assignments. This mission was more complex than anything she had previously supported, with potential consequences that extended far beyond the immediate rescue operation. That evening, as the assault team conducted final equipment checks, Sarah made last-minute preparations for her role in the Tactical Operations Center. She would be coordinating intelligence from multiple sources: thermal imagery, communications intercepts, seismic sensors, and radiation detectors, to provide real-time support to the ground team. At 0200 hours local time, the mission began. Sarah watched her displays as 2 helicopters approached the nuclear facility under cover of darkness. The compound was larger than the one in Somalia, with multiple buildings connected by underground tunnels. "Lightning, this is Raptor 11, came Mitchell's voice over the secure radio. "We have visual on target. Compound appears quiet. No visible security patrols." Sarah studied her displays carefully, noting thermal signatures throughout the main building. "Raptor 11, I'm tracking multiple heat sources in the central building, concentrated on the second and third floors. Recommend treating those areas as primary threat zones. Copy, Lightning. Beginning approach now." The helicopters landed simultaneously at opposite ends of the compound, allowing the assault team to approach the main building from multiple directions. Sarah watched through drone cameras as the SEALs moved swiftly across open ground toward their entry points. "Raptor 11, be advised the seismic sensors show movement in the underground level," Sarah reported urgently. "Multiple individuals moving toward the nuclear storage area. How long until they reach it?" Mitchell's voice was tense. Sarah coordinated quickly with Dr. Chun, who was monitoring the nuclear sensors from another workstation. "Estimated 3 to 4 minutes at current rate of movement." Copy, Lightning. "We're accelerating the timeline." The assault team breached the building simultaneously from 3 different entry points, using explosive charges to blast through reinforced doors. Sarah watched as they moved rapidly through the structure, engaging terrorist fighters while racing against time to prevent a nuclear contamination event. "Lightning, we need a route to the underground level that avoids the main stairwells," Mitchell requested as gunfire echoed through his radio transmission. Sarah quickly analyzed the building plans. "Raptor 11, there's a service elevator in the northeast corner of the building. It provides direct access to the lower level." Copy, Lightning. "Moving to northeast stairwell now." As the mission unfolded, Sarah coordinated with multiple intelligence sources to track both the assault team's progress and the movements of the terrorists. The seismic sensors showed that several fighters were indeed moving toward the nuclear storage area, presumably to carry out their threat to detonate explosives. "Raptor 11, the targets are now less than 50 meters from the nuclear storage vault," Sarah warned. "You have approximately 90 seconds to intercept them." "Understood, Lightning. We're in the elevator now, moving to intercept." The next few minutes were among the most intense of Sarah's career as she watched the race unfold between the SEAL team and the terrorists. Through the building's internal security cameras, she could see both groups moving through the underground corridors toward a confrontation that would determine the outcome of the mission. Lightning, we have visual on the targets, Mitchell reported. 4 individuals with what appears to be explosive devices. Engaging now. Sarah heard the sound of gunfire through the radio as the SEAL team engaged the terrorists in the underground level. The seismic sensors showed the movement stopping abruptly, indicating that the threat to the nuclear materials had been neutralized. Raptor 1-1, targets are down. Nuclear storage area is secure. A collective sigh of relief went up in the operations center. The most dangerous aspect of the mission had been successfully completed, eliminating the threat of nuclear contamination. But the mission was far from over. The hostages still needed to be located and rescued, and there were still terrorist fighters in other parts of the building. Lightning, we need guidance to the most likely hostage location, Mitchell requested. Sarah studied the thermal imagery and building layout. Raptor 1-1, based on the heat signatures and security considerations, I believe the hostages are being held in the main laboratory on the 3rd floor, eastern wing. Copy, Lightning. Moving to 3rd floor now. Sarah watched as the assault team methodically cleared their way through the building, engaging remaining terrorist fighters while searching for the hostages. The operation was proceeding smoothly, but she remained vigilant for any developments that could complicate the mission. 20 minutes after the initial breach, Mitchell's voice came over the radio with the words everyone had been hoping to hear. Lightning, this is Raptor 1-1. We have located all 37 hostages. They appear to be in good condition and are ready for extraction. Outstanding work, Raptor 1-1, Sarah responded, feeling a surge of relief and pride. The extraction proceeded without major complications, and, within an hour, all hostages and assault team members were safely aboard helicopters heading back to the staging area. The nuclear facility had been secured without any radiation release, and all of the terrorists had been either killed or captured. As Sarah compiled her post-mission intelligence report, General Hawthorne approached her workstation. Lieutenant Chun, that was exemplary work. Your intelligence support was crucial to the success of this mission. You probably prevented a nuclear disaster. Thank you, ma'am. I'm just glad everyone made it out safely. General Hawthorne studied her for a moment. I have something to discuss with you. Based on your performance on this mission and in Somalia, SOCOM is recommending you for promotion to captain and assignment as the senior intelligence liaison for all special operations missions in the European theater. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Such an assignment would represent the pinnacle of achievement for an intelligence officer and would put her in charge of supporting dozens of missions each year. That's an incredible opportunity, ma'am. You've earned it, General Hawthorne replied. But before you accept, there's something else you should know. This assignment would also make you one of the highest-ranking women in the special operations community. You'd be setting precedents and probably facing scrutiny that your male counterparts don't experience. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point, from the skeptical reception at Naval Base Coronado to becoming one of the most trusted intelligence officers in the special operations world. I understand the responsibilities, ma'am. I'm ready for the challenge. General Hawthorne smiled. I thought you might say that. Congratulations, Captain Chun. 2 years into her assignment as Senior Intelligence Liaison for European Special Operations, Captain Sarah Chun had overseen intelligence support for 47 successful missions across 15 countries. Her reputation as one of the most capable intelligence officers in the special operations community was firmly established, and her expertise was regularly sought by commanders throughout NATO. On this crisp October morning at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, Sarah was preparing for what promised to be one of the most challenging briefings of her career. She was scheduled to present intelligence assessments to a gathering of senior military leaders from across the alliance, including several generals who had initially opposed the integration of women into special operations roles. Among those attending was General Marcus Thompson, a 4-star Army general known for his traditional views on military culture and his skepticism about recent changes to combat roles. Thompson had been one of the most vocal critics of assigning women to work directly with special operations teams, and Sarah knew that he would be watching her presentation with particular scrutiny. Sarah arrived at the secure briefing facility an hour early to make final preparations. Her presentation covered intelligence assessments for potential operations across Eastern Europe, including detailed analyses of terrorist threats, political instability, and emerging security challenges that could require special operations intervention. As senior officers began filing into the briefing room, Sarah noticed the mix of curious glances and respectful nods that had become familiar over the years. Her reputation preceded her now, and most of the attendees had heard about her successful missions in Somalia and at the nuclear facility. General Thompson entered the room with his aide-de-camp, a young colonel who whispered something in his ear as they took their seats. Thompson's expression was stern as he studied Sarah with obvious skepticism. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this morning's intelligence briefing," began General Hawthorne, who was now the Deputy Commander of Special Operations Command. "Captain Chun will be presenting our current threat assessment for the European theater." Sarah moved to the front of the room, connecting her laptop to the projection system. As the first slide appeared on the screen, she began her presentation with the confidence that came from 2 years of successful mission support. "Good morning. I'll be briefing you today on emerging threats in Eastern Europe that may require special operations response within the next 6 months. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah presented detailed intelligence analyses covering potential terrorist plots, political instabilities, and security threats across the region. Her presentation was comprehensive and professionally delivered, drawing on intelligence from multiple sources and agencies. Throughout the briefing, General Thompson sat silently, occasionally taking notes but maintaining an expression that suggested skepticism about what he was hearing. Sarah noticed his attention but continued her presentation without allowing it to affect her delivery. As she concluded her formal briefing and opened the floor for questions, several officers asked detailed technical questions about her sources and methodology. Sarah answered each question thoroughly, demonstrating the depth of her knowledge and the rigor of her analytical process. Finally, General Thompson raised his hand. "Captain Chun, I have a question about your assessment of the threat in the Balkans," he said, his tone carrying an edge that suggested he was preparing to challenge her analysis. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional composure. Thompson stood up, his imposing 6'3" frame commanding attention from everyone in the room. "You've presented a fairly optimistic assessment of stability in that region. But I've been receiving reports that suggest a much more volatile situation. How do you reconcile that discrepancy?" Sarah felt the tension in the room increase as she recognized this as more than just a technical question. Thompson was testing her competence in front of the assembled senior officers, and her response would be carefully evaluated. "Sir, could you be more specific about which reports you're referring to? I'd be happy to address any particular concerns you have." Thompson smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "I'm talking about intelligence that suggests you've missed some significant threats because you lack the experience to properly assess complex security situations." The room fell completely silent. Several officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they recognized that Thompson was launching a direct challenge to Sarah's professional competence. Sarah felt a flash of anger at the accusation, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced this kind of challenge before, and she knew that responding emotionally would only validate Thompson's implied criticism. "General Thompson, I'd be very interested to see those reports," Sarah replied evenly. "My assessment is based on intelligence from CIA, NSA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and Allied Intelligence Services. If there are sources I haven't considered, I'd welcome the opportunity to incorporate that information into my analysis." Thompson's aide whispered something in his ear, and he nodded before continuing his attack. "Captain, don't you think this assignment might be beyond your capabilities? Managing intelligence for special operations requires experience and judgment that typically comes from years in combat zones. How many combat deployments have you actually completed?" Sarah recognized that Thompson was trying to undermine her credibility by questioning her combat experience. It was a tactic she had encountered before, and she was prepared for it. "Sir, I've completed 4 combat deployments, including 2 in Afghanistan and 2 in support of special operations missions in Africa and Europe. I've provided intelligence support for 53 successful special operations missions with 0 intelligence failures. But you've never actually been in direct combat, have you?" Thompson pressed. "You've always been safely back in some operations center while real warriors put their lives on the line." The implication in Thompson's words was clear. He was suggesting that Sarah's lack of direct combat experience disqualified her from supporting special operations missions. It was an argument that struck at the heart of the debate over women's roles in military operations. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her response to this moment would define not just her own career, but potentially the future opportunities for other women in similar roles. General Thompson, with respect, intelligence officers provide support from operations centers because that's where we can be most effective. Our job is to give warriors like the SEALs and special forces the information they need to complete their missions successfully and return home safely. That's not the point, Thompson continued, his voice rising slightly. The point is whether someone without direct combat experience can truly understand the pressures and requirements of special operations missions. General Hawthorne started to intervene, but Sarah held up a hand to indicate she wanted to respond herself. Sir, I've worked directly with SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, and Special Forces teams across multiple theaters. I've been personally requested by unit commanders for dozens of missions because my intelligence support has proven effective. The success rate speaks for itself. Thompson wasn't finished. He walked toward the front of the room, positioning himself directly in front of Sarah in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating gesture. Captain Chun, let me be blunt. I think this entire experiment of putting women in special operations roles is a mistake. It compromises unit cohesion, introduces unnecessary complications, and represents political correctness run amok. The room was now completely silent, with all eyes focused on the confrontation between the four-star general and the Army captain. Sarah could feel the weight of history in the moment. How she handled this challenge would be remembered and discussed for years to come. Sarah looked directly at Thompson, her voice steady and clear. General, my gender has never prevented me from providing exceptional intelligence support. The teams I've worked with judge me on my competence and professionalism, not on my sex. Thompson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that could still be heard throughout the silent room. Don't fool yourself, Captain. You think you're special because you've had a few successful missions? You think that makes you equal to the warriors who actually put their lives on the line? Sarah felt her anger rising but maintained her professional composure. She had dealt with this kind of intimidation before, and she wouldn't be cowed by Thompson's aggressive posture. I've never claimed to be equal to combat soldiers, sir. I've claimed to be competent at my job, which is providing intelligence support. The mission success rate supports that claim. Thompson's face was now red with anger. You arrogant little girl. You think you can come into our military and demand respect you haven't earned. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Several officers in the room shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that Thompson had crossed a line with his personal attack. Sarah felt something snap inside her. She had endured years of subtle discrimination and questioned competence, always maintaining her professionalism in the face of unfair treatment. But Thompson's blatant disrespect and personal attack demanded a response that went beyond measured professionalism. General Thompson, Sarah said, her voice carrying a steel edge that commanded attention. I have earned respect through 4 combat deployments, 53 successful mission supports, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Defense Superior Service Medal. I have never asked for special treatment because of my gender, and I have never failed to meet the standards required of my position. Thompson stepped even closer, invading her personal space in an obvious attempt at intimidation. You think those decorations mean something? You think they make you qualified to work with real warriors? What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Thompson reached out and grabbed a strand of Sarah's hair that had come loose from her regulation bun, yanking it roughly while sneering. Maybe you should focus more on meeting military grooming standards instead of pretending to be something you're not. The gesture was so unexpected, so inappropriate, and so clearly designed to humiliate Sarah that the entire room seemed to freeze in shock. For a moment, no one moved or spoke as the full implications of what had just happened sank in. Sarah's military training kicked in instinctively. In one smooth motion, she grabbed Thompson's wrist with her left hand, twisted it sharply to force him to release her hair, and stepped back into a defensive stance. Her years of hand-to-hand combat training had made the response automatic. Sir, I suggest you step back. Sarah said, her voice now carrying a dangerous quiet intensity. Thompson, shocked by the speed and effectiveness of her defensive move, found himself off balance and slightly stunned. The physical confrontation had revealed something he hadn't expected. This wasn't just an intellectual opponent, but someone with real combat training and the confidence to use it. The silence that followed was deafening. No one in the room had ever witnessed a four-star general physically assault a subordinate officer, and no one quite knew how to respond. The breach of military protocol and basic human decency was so egregious that it left even senior officers speechless. Finally, General Hawthorne stood up, her voice carrying the full authority of her position. General Thompson, that behavior is completely unacceptable and will be reported immediately to the Chief of Staff of the Army. Captain Chun, are you injured? No, ma'am, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Thompson seemed to realize the magnitude of his mistake. Assaulting a subordinate officer in front of witnesses was a career-ending offense that could result in court-martial proceedings and criminal charges. His face had gone pale as the implications became clear. That was, Thompson began, but he seemed unable to find words to explain or justify his actions. General Thompson, you will leave this briefing immediately, General Hawthorne ordered. Security will escort you from the building, and you will have no further contact with Captain Chun or any member of this command. As military police officers appeared to escort Thompson from the room, he turned back towards Sarah with a mixture of anger and desperation in his eyes. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, sir, it is, Sarah replied with calm finality. As Thompson was led from the briefing room, the remaining officers sat in stunned silence. The confrontation had been so dramatic and so clearly one-sided that it left no doubt about who had conducted themselves professionally and who had disgraced their uniform. General Hawthorne addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed here today was an unacceptable breach of military discipline and basic human decency. I want to be clear that Captain Chin's response was entirely appropriate given the circumstances, and that her record of service speaks for itself. One by one, the senior officers in the room stood and applauded. The applause continued for several minutes as these experienced military leaders showed their respect for both Sarah's professional competence and her dignity under assault. Later that day, as Sarah completed the incident reports required by Thompson's assault, she reflected on what had transpired. The confrontation had been ugly and disturbing, but it had also definitively settled questions about her place in the special operations community. The story of General Thompson's behavior and Sarah's composed response spread quickly throughout the military. Rather than damaging her reputation, the incident solidified her standing as an officer who could handle herself under any circumstances. 6 months later, Thompson was forced to retire in disgrace after a formal investigation confirmed the assault and revealed a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward female officers throughout his career. His actions had not only ended his own career but had also provided a stark example of the kind of behavior that had no place in the modern military. For Sarah, the incident marked a turning point in her career and in the broader acceptance of women in special operations roles. She had proven that competence and character mattered more than gender, and that respect had to be earned through performance rather than demanded through intimidation. 3 years later, Sarah was promoted to colonel and assigned as the Deputy Director of Intelligence for Special Operations Command. Her office walls displayed commendations from successful missions across the globe, but the moment she remembered most was the silence that had fallen across the base after she stood up to a bully who thought his rank gave him the right to humiliate and assault a subordinate officer. That silence had represented more than shock at Thompson's behavior. It had represented the recognition that the military's best traditions of honor, courage, and mutual respect belonged to anyone willing to uphold them, regardless of their gender. In that moment, Sarah had not just defended herself. She had defended the principle that excellence and character were the only standards that truly mattered in the profession of arms.